Hello and welcome to Sales Gambit. I'm your host Ashish, CEO of Convin, a conversation intelligence platform for the sales team. In today's episode, we'll be discussing about one of the most important issues out there for sales guys: how not to fail when doing cold calling for C-suite executives. And for that purpose, we have Risa Khamsi, a senior SDR at Lead IQ, with us today. She specializes in software sales, and apart from being an SDR herself, she also loves mentoring SDRs to be. A lovely fact about her is that she also helps rescue stray cats. And I think that's such an incredible thing to do. Lisa, if you only had more people like you, the world would be a better place.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And just quick correction, I just got promoted to account executive literally yesterday.
That's so great.
It's still really fresh, yes.
That's so great. That's so great to hear that, Lisa. And now we can, have the conversation both from a SDR perspective and an account executive perspective as well. That's so great. So, Risa, we're so happy to have you. Before we jump onto today's topic, Risa, can you give me a brief introduction about, how has been this journey for you all this while, right? And, what exactly are you doing right now?
Yes. Yeah, so just a little bit of background on me. I spent about 10 years working in the service industry, not really sure what I wanted to do with my life. And then in March of 2020, when COVID kind of became a big thing, I lost both of my jobs overnight and thought to myself, all right, I can sit here and feel sorry for myself, or I can learn a new skill. So that's when I did a tech sales boot camp. I learned, all of the jargon, all of the objection handling skills and familiarity with sales tools. Ended up getting hired with Lead IQ, which I loved. And then kind of led me down the path of like this tech sales journey that I've had. And so ultimately, I've ended up in an account executive role literally as of yesterday. So it's a pretty cool thing to think that only a couple years ago I was like serving pastries for minimum wage, and now I'm an account executive. It's just, life is crazy.
It's so great to hear that. I really love that journey, and how you have actually upskilled yourself in the middle of a crisis, and you have come out really strong with that. So I'm really, really happy for you. Before we jump into this today's topic, Risa, right? Cold calling in general would be like bread and butter, right? And it's something that you'd be doing probably very regularly. Is that correct understanding as of now?
Yeah, definitely. The more I can cold call, the better, because it saves me time on sending emails. That's my strategy.
That's very interesting. So just for the audience, right? What percentage of the meetings are you, or were you booking from cold calls earlier?
Yeah, I would say it varies, from month to month, but on average, probably about 75% of the meetings I'm booking are from cold calls. So
that's amazing, right? So that really establishes that cold call in general is working for you, right?
Oh yeah.
And the target audience that you'd be reaching out to would be head of sales or someone in the management side of sales?
Yeah, head of sales, VP of sales, sales development manager, sales operations manager. Those are the titles I'm really going after.
Interesting. So now if we have to, probably trickle down from that, do you think it's challenging to get access or book a meeting with, someone managing the sales at a very high level? It can be a CRO or a VP of sales. If yes, why do you think that is the case?
Yeah, I honestly think it's how swamped they are. It depends on the company, but I know that our VP of sales, who actually just joined, we finally just got a VP of sales. He is just slammed all day, every day. And my sales development manager, well, he's our director of sales now. He's already busy, but he's not quite as busy as the VP of sales. So it's like, I think it's just a thing of bandwidth and what those titles can really handle and squeeze into their schedule.
And then let's compare that to a C executive, right? C-suite executive. Do you think that is there any possibility of even getting on a cold call with them?
I think there's always a possibility. I would never write that off. I think it's more about how receptive they're going to be to the cold call, because, if you get an SDR manager on the phone, they're going to be a lot more understanding and empathetic and likely to take your call than someone who's kind of maybe been away from that role for a while and doesn't remember quite how difficult it can be.
Fair point. Fair point. So then, can we say that we should be keeping our discussion limited to VP of sales or those kind of people who you were generally calling to get
Yeah,
your
I think
experience?
so. I think so. That would make sense.
Okay. Okay. For example, let's say the first question that I would really love to understand is that you have multiple people in the hierarchy, right? Who you can call for lead IQ, right? Who do you choose to call the first, and
Mhm.
how do you decide that?
Yes, that's a great question. I always try to call an SDR manager or a BDR manager first because they are on the forefront of everything that's happening with their outbound sales team. And for lead IQ, I'm trying to make outbound prospecting easier and more fun. So if I can kind of convey that to someone who's on the front lines of all that outbound work, I think it resonates more than if I get someone from sales operations on the phone. For some reason, sales operation folks they're a little more buttoned up and kind of hard to to nail down. So
Yeah.
I always try to start with an SDR manager and then kind of work my way up from there.
Okay. And when you say work your way up the hierarchy, right? What does it really mean? How does
Yeah.
it go from?
Yeah, so usually after an SDR manager, I'll call VP of sales, and then sales operations manager is probably the last thing I try. I always try to, be multi-threaded in my outreach and reach out to multiple titles from one company. But in terms of prioritization, I know that who is more likely to reply, and that's an SDR manager, whether it be to an email or a cold call or a LinkedIn message or something like that.
Do you see the VP of sales or probably a head of sales getting involved in the decision making process for your product that you're trying to sell?
Yeah, they usually do, but it really depends on the company. Like sometimes they're totally not involved. Sometimes they're the only decision maker. It varies so much. It's pretty interesting.
Interesting. Great. So if you think about it, right, today it's all digital, right? So I mean, any SDR, that should they have a very good enough social media strategy in place as a part of connecting with these people who are on the higher part or higher level of the hierarchy? Do you think that is
Yeah.
important?
I think it can't hurt. I know a lot of people, I love this question because I am really active on LinkedIn and just started getting kind of more viral posts with like 200,000 views, over 1,000 likes, things like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it necessarily helps me book a significant percentage increase of more meetings. So to give you an example, I would say in the last couple months, I've gotten probably almost 500,000 views of my posts, and I've only booked 2 meetings off of like interacting with like social and that type of thing. So for the first meeting that I booked because of LinkedIn, it was because I noticed someone liked my post who was a sales manager at a company that was one of my accounts. And so I emailed him based on that and got a meeting that way. The other way was kind of more inbound. I had a sales leader like message me and basically ask for a demo. That hardly ever happens, but I would say that LinkedIn social media kind of thing is not as good for prospecting in my experience. I know it depends. Everyone has different strategies, as it is for just like building your brand and having lots of job opportunities, if that makes sense.
Fair point. And if I have to go back to the cold calling part, right? As you said, right, cold calling is probably the best thing you can do instead of writing emails because that saves you a ton of time, right? If you have to guide someone about cold calling, SDR manager, or let's say a head of sales, my preferred, designation would be a VP of sales. If you can help us or help our audience to go through that process, that would be great.
Yeah, just kind of how I approach a cold call.
Yeah, for a
Yep.
VP of sales, probably.
Yes. Honestly, I used to see VP of sales on the screen and outreach and just kind of like freeze up and just get really awkward and nervous. But what has worked so much better for me is just imagining the VP of sales as a friend. And that might sound
Okay.
weird, but I'm not overly casual, but when I call them with a tone and a pitch that reflects how friendly and fun I want this call to go. So people resonate with that so much more, when I keep it casual and keep it kind of fun than when I'm very like, oh, I'm so serious, I'm calling you about your outbound sales team. So I definitely like keep it light, and I have a lot of success with that.
Interesting. So, for example, what you're trying to say is just be human, right? And treat them as another human who you are talking to, right? And you're just exploring things, probably.
Definitely.
Right?
And I also used to be scared to take up too much time to kind of build a little bit of a rapport in the beginning. Like, hey, so how's your day been? Like, and if they say something like, oh, I just moved. Oh, okay. Where'd you move to? Like, I used to kind of be too scared to kind of dig into whatever they did share with me. Now I definitely make like time for that, and it helps the conversation just kind of organically unfold.
So let's say when you call them, right, and they slammed already, won't they say that, hey, I can't talk right now? How do you go about that? I mean, it would be great if you can tell me the entire process of how a sample conversation can go with them.
Okay. Yeah. So I learned this one-liner from my boss, Jameson Pence. He's amazing. So shout out to Jameson. But whenever someone says, yeah, right now is really not a good time, because I always ask for permission. Then if they tell me I don't have time from there, I'll say, yeah, totally understand. You're extremely slammed. Like, I get it. I mean, I do get it. But do you mind if I give you like 30 seconds of context to see if this is worth a call back at a better time? And I would say like 6 or 7 times out of 10, they'll say that's fine. And then they're kind of giving me permission to keep talking, and the conversation just kind of unfolds from there. I kind of take the conversation like I would even if they hadn't said they were super busy. So because usually they're like just trying to rush me off the phone. But yeah, I just kind of continue to speak confidently, and it usually goes well. Not every single time, but it usually goes well.
Interesting. And once that opening has been done, right, and let's say they have given you the permission to speak, right, how do you go about it? Do you just generally go about introducing yourself on the company, or there's some specific trick out there that you sort of generally follow? Because that's, I think, the most important, right?
Yeah.
When you ask for 30 seconds, what you say in those 30 seconds is very important, right? So how do you go about that?
That's a good question. I don't start talking about lead IQ immediately. I reference the light research that I've done on the company, and really any company I'm reaching out to looks like they're going outbound with LinkedIn Sales Navigator. The way that I can identify that is the gold badge on their profile. So I'll say something like, hey, I noticed, so, the reason I'm reaching out, or the reason for my call, is I noticed that you appear to have, some reps who are doing some outbound prospecting with LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Am I on the right track there? And then they say yes, or, they say yes, because I already have done my research.
You already have done that.
Yeah. Okay, great. That's awesome. The reason I asked that is Lead IQ is a tool that sits right alongside LinkedIn Sales Navigator to speed up prospecting. And then I kind of give them like a quick 5-sentence thing that kind of just gives our value prop and like why teams are using us. And then I open up with a question that's open-ended that gets a lot of people thinking. So tell me, like, what do your reps do when they can't find an email or a phone number with insert our competitor? And then, they end up saying like, that's a good question. They either skip the person or they message them on LinkedIn. And I'll say like, I hear that from a lot of sales leaders. The problem with that is that's a missed opportunity for new business. So Lead IQ, you can get tons of mobile phone numbers, and I kind of go on from there. And it really works well because I am asking like a situational question that gives them a picture in their mind of like, what do my reps do in that situation?
Yeah, basically you're asking them to think about it, right? And then it's more like, I'm sure you would be following Josh Braun as well. He says it as a, question that you're digging deep into it and you're figuring out what they really don't know, and makes them think. Is that correct?
Yes. And I think I really am a big believer in situational questions. I think when I first started out, I was given a list of like really kind of weird questions. Like they just didn't flow in the conversation. Like how much outbound prospecting is your team doing? It's like, that's like a boring question,
Yeah. True.
Like I want to ask something that's situational, where it's going to make them think about the situation and have to like visualize what their reps are actually doing to get them talking.
That's very important. That's very important. And once you're able to establish that, right, in front of them as a value proposition, right, I'm pretty much sure that they would be asking some follow-up questions, or want to go deeper into the product. Do you resist yourself going deeper into the product, or do you go with the flow and tell them more and more about the product?
I do tell them more about the product. I do definitely make an effort to answer their questions in any way I can. But once they start asking questions and I answer, I use that opportunity to ask for the meeting, because I can tell that they're interested. And so like I learned from another manager that that's kind of the area where it's like the hook. Like you've got them interested. Okay, now don't let this conversation just drag out forever. This is when you proactively ask for that meeting and get on the books.
Yeah. And what is the style in which you go ahead and ask for that meeting? Is it about hey, why don't we go on a 15-minute call to discuss more, or what else do you use there?
I never use like language that's saying like 15 or 30 minutes, because I feel like that just sounds so stuffy. So I always say like, hey, so it sounds like, and I'll kind of highlight something that they said. Your reps are just skipping a prospect when they can't find contact information. What do you say we just throw something on the calendar sometime next week? And you can kind of take a look at the tool, see if it would be helpful to your rep's current workflow, and we can kind of go from there. So I keep it really casual, and I think that resonates with people because they don't want to feel like you are putting a lot of pressure on them, or you have really high expectations like for this meeting.
Fair point. So keeping it very human as a conversation, and just like we're talking to someone else, would be the best possible way.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because of the number of conversations you'd be doing, this was a happy case scenario, right, where everything went well. But what about those cases where you're mostly looking at, you're talking to someone and they would definitely raise up an objection, right? So if I have to ask you two very specific questions, Risa, one, what objections do you hear the most calling to someone higher in the sales hierarchy? And then how do you handle those objections?
I would say the objection I honestly hear the most is, we're already using ZoomInfo. That's, one of our biggest competitors. But whenever I hear that, it's really not an objection, because if you think about it, when a team is using like one data provider, they're really only getting contact information maybe like 50 to 60% of the time. Like you're never going to have an email and a phone number for everyone. So I really just stress the importance of like increasing your contact data coverage, like increase your chances of your team reaching your prospects, which increases the chances of meetings being booked, which increases the chances of you building more revenue. So I think I try to just do like a reframe where I'm like, totally hear you that you're using some info. I hear that all the time. Most of actually a lot of Lead IQ customers are using ZoomInfo. They use this in tandem because, ZoomInfo is strong for work phone numbers, but Lead IQ is strong for mobile phone numbers. So you can really get a benefit from using both. And then you've got the workflow aspect to it. We can save you hundreds of hours a quarter on manual work, and then kind of like take it from there.
Oh, that's very interesting. So you basically, competition is one of the most important objection, as you said, right?
Yeah.
And then you go about handling it as basically making sure that you acknowledge the competition, and then adding the value on top of what you provide, right?
Definitely.
What your company provides. That's interesting. What about those cases where it's not competition? It's a different objection. That, hey, I don't want to talk. I am not available right now. I've got to go. I'm going to a meeting. Multiple types of other things, right? What do you go about that?
Yeah, so I learned this again from my boss, Jameson Pence. You always need to ask for the meeting on the first call, because statistically, if you don't get that meeting on the first call and then you're like chasing them, they're not as likely to answer. They're not as likely to take the meeting like every touch point after. So I always treat that first call as like, this is it. This is the only chance I get. That's how I look at it. And that pushes me to try and push harder through their objections and be more bold on the phone. So if someone says something like, I can't talk right now, like I'm really slammed, I always use the 30 seconds of context line. Or if I can hear a meeting in the background, sometimes the prospect isn't lying and they're actually on a meeting and they just
Yeah.
muted themselves and took the call.
Yeah.
In that case, I'll say, oh yeah, I can hear that you're on a meeting. I appreciate you picking up. What time would be better for me to call back? Like, can I call you back this afternoon? Maybe like when you're towards the end of your workday, like 4:45, and they'll usually say like, yeah, that works better. You know, like it's a low pressure ask. Yeah, like just want to chat for 5 minutes, like when you're wrapping things up, if that's cool with you. And I'll do that, or I'll send them like a tentative 15-minute invite. But I like to do more of just a regular phone call because again, it's like keeping it more casual.
Got it. And have you heard those objections where people say that they're not in the market right now looking out for these tools, they don't have the budget, right? Basically refuting whatever you have to say once they have understood what you're trying to tell them. How do you go about those things?
Yeah, I actually learned this from our team lead, Alex Turcha. He's great. He's like seriously amazing.
Okay.
But he said whenever someone tells him that, and now we all kind of use this, is really no one I'm reaching out to is on the market for tools, but it's just really worth it to just explore, see what your options are, stay ahead of your competition. Your competition might have taken a meeting with us. You might want to just check us out and really see, what avenues you can explore when it comes to data providers. So I think just kind of calling it out, like, yeah, most people I reach out to are not looking for tools, but XYZ. And so I think that kind of usually gets a good response.
Interesting. I have a very specific question, Risa. Before we jump onto the stages after that, if we take a step back, right? Cold calling is not an easy job, and that also, if you're talking about cold calling someone who's like a VP of sales in some company, right? How do you mentally prepare yourself first? How do you go about? And it's not about just one person, right? It's not just about calling one person who's a VP of sales. Cold calling in general is a very hard job, and you have to be very disciplined about it, right? As far as I have done. How do you mentally prepare yourself to be disciplined about calling, let's say, 100 people every day, right? And making sure that you're doing your best on every call of them.
Yeah. So thankfully at Lead IQ, we're not making 100 dials a day. We're definitely more about quality over quantity, which I'm a firm believer in. That's why I love Lead IQ. But I will say when it comes to making calls, not overthinking it is really key, because when I first started out as an SDR, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And I would look at the screen and I would see VP of sales and I would just like start shaking with fear. Now I try not to even really look at their title, to be completely honest, because it's not the title, it's the person I'm speaking with and like what their needs are. Obviously, a VP of sales is going to care about different things than like a sales operations manager. So I do try to keep that in mind. But when it comes to like having that human to human interaction, VP of sales is just a person at the end of the day. And a lot of them actually return my informal kind of tone on the phone when I deliver that to them first. So I think really just this is going to sound kind of silly, but right before I make calls too, I try to like actually get excited. If I get them on the phone, that's going to be awesome. Like, cause I can book a meeting in 10 minutes instead of chasing someone down for hours via email. And so I let that excitement kind of like shine through in my voice. And I also give myself a mental thank you in advance for the call going well. And that's because of a book I read on gratitude. I really think it helps my mindset and then how my voice actually sounds on the phone. Yeah.
That's very interesting. I've heard that for the first time, giving a thank you to yourself while the call is going good. That's interesting. If I have to think about it, you'd also be doing research, right, before doing a cold call, right?
Yeah.
One, how important do you think is the research? Second, how frequently do you really use it on a cold call?
That's a good question, because I think in the beginning I was doing way too much research before I'd call someone, and then most of the times they don't answer. So it was a huge inefficiency and waste of time. Now I have a couple strategies for it. So one is, anytime I get someone on a phone from a particular account, I will go ahead and add the notes from that call directly into my SDR notes in Salesforce. And then how we have it mapped out in Lead IQ is that we have custom field mapping so that the SDR notes from Salesforce populate in Outreach. And so when I'm calling the person, I can actually see, like, okay, I last spoke with Sam, and he said that Gary was the right person to speak with, and that their reps are using like LinkedIn Sales Navigator and Outreach and Salesforce. And so if I get Sam on the phone, I'll say, hey, Gary referred me to you. He said that you guys have a need for X, Y, and Z. And so I thought it'd be relevant to reach out. That's a way to save yourself a lot of time. Another thing is, like, on kind of more the personalization front, is scanning their LinkedIn. I always pull up someone's LinkedIn every time I'm calling someone, because it takes like 1 second. And I remember one call where I saw that my prospect had volunteered at Animal Care and Control in San Francisco. And so right when I got her on the phone, I said, hey, I noticed you used to volunteer at Animal Care and Control. I used to volunteer at Muttville right across the street. And then I worked at the San Francisco SPCA right next to that. So, but that's not the reason for my call. Animals aside. And then, like, I noticed that blah, blah, blah. So she loved that intro. And it was just because I was being genuine, I really did think it was cool that she volunteered there.
Yeah. Got it. So then you're saying that you do the research and sometimes you use it. But I want to ask a very statistical question. Yes. Everyone focuses a lot on emphasizing on the research on the cold calls, right? Personally, what I've felt is, it's extreme. You need a lot of skill to bring that research into that cold call in that flow, right? When you open the cold call and everything like that. Where do you use the most part of your research? Do you use it in the opening of the call or later on at later stages?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the situation, because, with that prospect who had that volunteer experience, I wanted to use that right off the bat, because I felt like it would get her to listen to me and not just brush me off. But I didn't feel like it makes sense to bring it up later in the conversation when we're already talking about Lead IQ. So I kind of wanted to get that out of the way up front. But when it comes to things like referrals, or, like getting someone on the phone where their colleague said that they are really trying to increase meetings booked. In that situation, I will hold off and wait till the prospect gives me an objection, like, really not interested in something like this right now. I'll be like, oh, really? Because Gary told me that you are, and that GDPR compliance is really a problem for you guys right now. And your SDRs aren't hitting quota. So, you said that it's not really a problem for you, but, like, don't you think this would be worth taking a look at? And then you're just kind of calling them out, what can they say to that? Like, yeah, I guess you're right.
Yeah, true. But how many times do you really use a research? Out of 10, if you have to just give me a number statistically?
I would say probably like 5 times out of 10. It's not
5 times.
Yeah, like I know something about my prospect definitely before I'm calling them, but I don't think that you have to go that deep into it to really have a successful call.
Got it. Towards the end of it, Risha, I would love to understand from your perspective, is that what are the couple of things you would say, a fellow SDR to not really do on a cold call? A couple of things that you really want to, put up front, saying that these are the things we should not be doing on the cold call.
Yes, that's a great question, because I'm mentoring a couple people right now on how to cold call, and they're really struggling. And it's just one of those things you really have to, like, practice and just get it. Like, until it clicks, it doesn't click. So I think slowing down, number one, that is the number one thing, like, new people who are new to cold calling should consider. I used to speak really fast, and when you speak really fast, it makes you sound not confident in what you're saying.
Yeah.
So if you're not talking slow as molasses, but if you're speaking, with kind of a confident and measured cadence, I feel like people will just actually listen to what you're saying. And then another part of it is tonality. If you end on a high note, you sound unsure of yourself. But if you end on a down note, you sound confident. So it's like watching that pitch. If you're going up, a lot of the people that reach out to me for help, they're like going up a lot. And then, but if you're going down on your notes, you sound really sure of yourself, and people will believe and trust and be interested in what you're saying.
Understood. Very interesting. Any reading recommendations that you have for our audience who are watching them?
It's a good question. I really like the Challenger Sale. I don't follow the Challenger Sale like to a T, but I think it's a really interesting book because it basically points out that the highest performing reps are going to challenge their prospects in some way. So for example, if I have a prospect say, we don't need more than one data provider. Like we've got everything we need.
Yeah.
Then that's my chance to challenge them to say, really? Because, well, what do they do when they can't find a phone number and email with SIM info? Like, we actually fill in the gaps. I mean, are you guys even really getting mobile phone numbers? Because I've used that tool before and I didn't really get a lot of mobile data. So like just challenging them, challenging their beliefs or challenging their assumptions can really get the conversation going somewhere and make it feel like this is going to be a valuable demo for them.
Interesting. Any other books? So you mentioned gratitude, right? That's something that people can read. So I was trying to ask this from a mindset perspective, right? One is a skill, second is the mindset. You might have skill, but if the mindset is not right, it becomes very difficult to go for cold calling, right?
So true.
Anything that helps with the mindset?
Yeah, book-wise?
Yeah, book-wise or anything to read. Yeah.
Yes. So I would recommend this book to everyone, just for life in general and career. Like, it's amazing. It's called The Magic by Rhonda Byrne. And it honestly, I mean, I don't want to sound cheesy, but I really feel like it's genuinely changed my life because it's all about giving gratitude and giving thanks for what you do have today. And then also giving thanks for what you don't have yet, but that you want to manifest in the future. And it has worked for me in several ways. I didn't share this specific part of my story on LinkedIn, but I actually, when I decided I wanted to sell my house, I wrote myself a check for $700,000 because I wanted to make that selling my house. And I put it on the wall and I would look at every day and I would just say, thank you for my $700,000 sale. And I just kept saying that to myself, like, thank you. I felt silly doing it, but I just did it. And a couple years later, I sold my house for $750,000, which is crazy. Like, the market in Oakland, California is insane. But it was just one of those things where, like, it's so cool to be able to, on a call or in life, like, give thanks for something going the way you want it to. If it doesn't, at least you tried. But if it does, then it's like really a reason to be thankful.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. I mean, the thought of it is very beautiful.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I love it.
So that's all the questions I had for you, Risa, today.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming to Sales Gambit. And it was a delight to have you.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. This was fun.
Sure. Yeah. This is your host, Ashish, signing off. See you next week with a brand new episode.